Hey everybody, welcome to the Homegrown Heroes podcast. I'm Mike Kai, your host. Take this journey with me as we talk story with some of the best and brightest of these islands who started from humble beginnings to making an impact across the globe. Please take a moment to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now, let's meet this week's Homegrown Hero. Hey everybody, this is Mike Kai. I want to welcome you to season number 1, episode 2 of the Homegrown Heroes podcast with Bryan Clay. The Homegrown Heroes podcast is all about profiling and platforming athletes, entertainers, and business people who made it big in the world, all the way from Hawaii. So please join me with this incredible podcast with Bryan Clay. Bryan Clay is a former decathlete, U.S. Olympian, gold and silver medalist, and athlete of the year. His credentials go far and wide. It's an incredible time that I had with Bryan where I got to interview him. Also knowing that Bryan and I knew each other when he was younger, when he was in junior high and high school, and I was his youth pastor for about a minute. And I had the privilege and honor of, in some ways, sitting on the front row with the rest of Hawaii, watching this young man from Kaneohe, Hawaii, Oahu, succeed like nobody's business and nobody ever has on a global stage. I think since Duke Kahanamoku at the Olympics. I could be wrong, but it's my podcast, so I'm excited about this. Homegrown Heroes, it's about what people are doing in Hawaii who've taken it throughout the world. I think you're really going to enjoy this time. I think we get to hear Bryan's heart. We get to actually see what's inside of him and what made him a success and how God's hand had played with him all along the way. And so I hope that you're gleaning a lot out of this. Make sure you share this and send it to a lot of your friends and your family, especially people who live outside of Hawaii and especially people who are living in Hawaii right now, who need some inspiration, who need to believe that they can do something in a season like this. So enjoy this. Bryan Clay, an incredible athlete, a decathlete. Remember now, he was only 5'10". That's about 2 inches shorter than me. 5'10", but considered the greatest athlete in the world in 2004 and even in 2008. I hope you enjoy it. So, hey Bryan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey, it's really good to catch up with you. I know you've got a lot of things that are going on in your life, and one of them being one of the world's greatest athletes. So it's good to have you, and you still look like you're in incredible shape. You look like you haven't left the Olympic Games at all. And tell me right now, wouldn't we be in Tokyo right now for the Olympics?
Yeah, we would be. It was just a few weeks ago, I think they would have just kind of finished up and everything would have happened. But it's been a crazy year. I mean, it's one of those years that's full of uncertainty. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and they're a little bit crazy right now. Everybody's schedules are crazy, and the Olympics, one of the things that kind of took the hit. And there's a lot of athletes that are, having to readjust and figure out how they're going to make all this work.
Yeah, that's incredible. I think they got it scheduled for next year. If it all works out, they're going to do back in Tokyo next year.
Yeah, I think that's the goal. The goal is to have this just get pushed out a year, come back and make another run at it. I have no idea what the world's going to be like then, but I'm hoping that everything kind of calms down and we get back to a sense of normalcy a little bit, and that these athletes that have worked so hard for so many years actually have the opportunity to go and compete.
Right. I mean, when you think about the Olympics, amateur athletes, for lack of a better word, they're actually professional athletes, but they're amateur athletes, so they're not getting paid for competing. That must be difficult. I can imagine the times that you were competing, trying to get sponsored back in the day. What was that like during that time, trying to catch the eye of somebody who would help you with your journey?
It was tough. I think the thing that was so tough for me is so much of what you do is not just about how you compete. A lot of it has to do with what you're doing outside of that competition. It's the preparation. It's the years and years of the ups and downs that you're going through that kind of get you even to the place where you have the opportunity to do that. And so for me, it was just a journey. I mean, my story. I mean, we, growing up, and it was just this crazy journey of going from, no one, I think, ever actually thinking or believing that I was going to be able to accomplish anything in my life because I was on a different path, and being able to find a way and a path to success and along the way learn and grow and be molded into, what I hope eventually will turn into a man of God that, on Judgment Day, God will sit down and say, hey, good job. And that's all I'm striving for. So it's a little crazy. It's hard. It's discipline and planning and grit and all these different things that have to come together. But it's just one big crazy ride. And I've been so blessed to be able to, live it out.
Hey everybody, if you don't know this, for a minute I was Bryan Clay's youth pastor, maybe just for a camp. And Bryan, I remember that camp. That camp was crazy, wasn't it? That was
it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was up in the North Shore in the mountains, everybody, and I cut my teeth on that camp, and it was crazy. But I remember Bryan coming up to me. There was this one pivotal moment where I made the decision as a leader to shut down this dance because it was getting a little nasty, and it was a little too live crew-ish. And the kids are chanting, and I said, "This camp is over. This is over." And I remember I went into that little pantry room, Bryan. I don't know if you know, but I was crying in there. I was like, "Lord, what am I doing as a youth pastor?" And I remember there were two guys that came up to me. Shandon Silva walked up to me, and took it to heart, and because he was a leader, and so were you. And you came up to me, and you guys too both helped me to move on from that moment as a young leader. But hey, I've been so proud of you. I know I'm a lot older than you are, but I remember a younger Bryan Clay, maybe in your teenage years, before track came into your life. You had you and your brother Nick. I was in small group with your mom and your stepdad, Mike and Michelle. And remember you hanging around church and part of the crew, and you were a little bit more on the stoic, serious side, and Nick was just happy to be around, and you were hanging out with some young guys like Mikey and those guys. And tell us about when did you start realizing that, man, you like track, that sport?
It was, I started to realize that I enjoyed track really when I first started it. So that was back in like 6th grade. And the reason why I found out that I liked it so much is because I was good at it. Something that I was good at. I wasn't the best, but I was good at it. And so I could find a place to kind of fit in. And I think back then when things were a little bit rocky kind of in my life, you're as a kid, you're just looking for a place to belong, a place where you can fit in, a place where you feel like you can have an impact, where people respect you, where people see you as their peer and their friend, but also as their equal, not somebody that's inferior that has to, prove themselves. And so that's what I loved. And I love that the idea of track is it's an individual sport. So it wasn't based on anybody else. And I think my mom, in her infinite wisdom, getting me involved in track was just short of, a miracle, I think, in my mind, because it was one of those things, like, she could have just not had me do sports. She could have done so many other things or sent me down so many other paths based on where I was at in my life. And it wouldn't have turned out the way that it did. And so it was right about 6th grade. I started to love going out and running. And then it really turned into a passion of mine in high school, like freshman, sophomore year. And I always tell people the reason why is because I remember coming to the track one day, and my Coach He, who passed away a few years ago, was such a huge influence in my life.
Martin He, right?
Yeah, Martin He. He met me at the track one day, and I had broken up with my girlfriend for I don't know how many times, and I was fighting with my mom and my stepdad, and failing some classes, and it was just chaotic. And I remember him saying, Bryan, when you come to the fence of the track, when you get to this fence, the gate actually, he said, I want you to leave everything that's going on in your life, visualize it, and then leave it behind you. He's like, just imagine it falling off your shoulders. So I was always I'm still a very literal person. And so I would, heard him say that, and I would come to the track early and I would practice that. I would stand there and I'd imagine all this stuff just being left behind and falling off my shoulder. And he said, Bryan, I want you to do this because when you get to the track, there's nothing you're going to do on the track that's going to change any of that. So just take this time for you. And when you come off the track, I guarantee you, when you walk back through these gates, you can pick it all back again and you can go deal with it. But when you're here, just give yourself this little space, And so I always tell people the track became my sanctuary. It became the place where I could go and I knew that things were going to be at peace. I knew that it was going to be okay. I was in control of this little space. And as I ran, I would run myself into the ground, and I would be so exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, that I would get to a place where I would have to surrender. I'd have to just give up. And even though I didn't know who I was giving up to, or what I was giving up, I just got to a place where I just said, I can't do this anymore. And I can't fight anymore. And I can't take this on myself anymore. And I would just give up. And with that kind of, now what I would call this release and this surrender, there was this freedom that came, and this perspective that you would all of a sudden take on. And I was able to walk away from that track every day, with a different perspective and pick all those issues back up. But for a small point in time, even if it was just for a couple days, I was able to think and to do things differently and more clearly, which gave me hope. And so every time I would turn around, I'd come back to the track and I'd do it again. And I'd turn around and come back to the track and I would do it again, because I just got this little bit of hope every time I did it. And then that started to open up even more doors and even more doors. And so I think about that verse, Romans 5:3-5, where it talks about, we take heart in our sufferings because, and I'm going to butcher this because I'm not the pastor, you are, so I'll let you.
You got the address. You got to call it out.
Yeah, but it's like, it's this idea that we take joy in our sufferings because sufferings bring perseverance. Perseverance builds character. Character gives us hope, and that hope has never let us down. And that's what that was for me. I mean, I suffered and I persevered, and it built character. And as that character was being built, even though it was just little tiny pieces of character, seeds, I would say, it gave me hope. And that hope hasn't let me down. It put me on the path, and it put me on where I am today. And again, I say it all the time, and people get tired of hearing me say it, but I'm so blessed to have experienced that. And it's not by any of my own, doing, or my mom's doing. It's the faithfulness that I think God had, or I should say God's answer to the faithfulness that my mom had, in her imperfection and in her not knowing what to do, that is blessed me, blessed my family, and just given us more than we could ever ask for.
I remember that you ran for a public school. That was Castle High School. You went to Benjamin Parker Elementary at the same time before that,
Parker,
right?
Yeah.
So in that Ben Parker, you're probably running through that field, that huge field, discovering your potential and your gift and what God had for you. Going to a public school, you could have gone to probably like a Iolani or a Punahou would have been a faster track to somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And then you get picked up by Azusa Pacific, an NAIA school. Tell us about how that all worked out for you.
Yeah, so I didn't have any plans of going to college, right? When I was in high school, it wasn't until track started to open some of these collegiate doors that I started to realize, oh, maybe this is. To be honest, I was thinking to myself, oh, maybe this is a way I can get away from my house, like get away from home, right? And I don't have to listen to my mom. I don't have to go to church. I don't have to, do this or do that. I can do whatever I want. I'm free. Right. Make my own decisions. And that was really attractive to me. And so as I was looking at schools and I was starting to receive, letters from schools, asking, or kind of saying like, hey, we want to talk to you, want to follow you, want to give you scholarships, stuff like that. You kind of get a little bit proud. And I was like, oh, I'm going D1, and told my mom I was going to go D1. And my mom used to say, well, hang on a second. Like, let's wait, let's see. And I was like, listen, you're not paying for it. I'm the one that sacrificed. I'm the one that had to run every day. I'm the one who's getting the scholarship. So, you don't get to stay. And that was kind of my attitude. And I even remember being, just cocky enough that when I told my mom, I said, listen, if you're worried about the shoes, if it's all the shoes that you bought me, and that's what's, you're going to say, that's why you get a say, I'll tell you what, when I get famous, I'll write you a check for all the shoes that you bought me, and I'll just pay you back so you don't have to worry about it. I mean, that's kind of how I was. And I know, man, I think back on it and I'm like, man, what, I don't know how my mom did it. Honestly, I just don't know how. It's by the grace of God.
Amazing. But, she's amazing.
She's when you see your parents, you see them differently than maybe everybody else does,
right.
and when I was younger, it was, one of these things, all you see is the imperfections, right? You pick out all the imperfections because those are the things that you don't like, but you don't have any perspective to really look at the bigger picture. And you have no idea about the pressures and the responsibilities and the hurt and the pain that people are operating with through everyday life,
right.
Just to make it. And so when I think back now, man, on my mom, and it breaks my heart, to think about how I treated her, absolutely breaks my heart. And I wish, every day that I could go back and I could do things differently, but it's what it is, and it's my story. And so,
right.
so I embrace that. And I know my mom would say the same thing, about her own journey.
Right. And
so, she's been an absolute blessing in my life. I mean, I couldn't imagine where I would be if it wasn't for her faithfulness. And I always tell people sometimes, some days my mom's best, the best that she could give God was laying in her room, in her bed, crying for hours and hours and hours, while my brother and I had to fend for ourselves, figure out breakfast, figure out lunch, figure out dinner, and what we were going to do all day. I mean, like literally, I was her best sometimes. And I, God, that she never gave up. I mean, I thank God that she tried to just be as faithful as she possibly could. And the result of what God was able to do, work a miracle out of that situation is just mind blowing. I mean, it's just unbelievable. But anyways,
you beat the odds.
Getting back to your question,
your mom helped you beat the odds, man. I mean, you're supposed to be a statistic.
Yep, the whole time through, she was right there. She still is. Sometimes I'm like, Mom, okay, you got to back off. I'm married now. I got my own kids, but she's still there. Every step of the way. And so I was going to go D1, like I said. My mom, convinced me to make this visit to Azusa Pacific University. My first visit. I was really turned off by the school. They couldn't pay for me to come out there. I think they maybe reimbursed my parents for the hotel. I'm not sure. I don't think so. It wasn't Division I. It was NAIA, all that kind of stuff. And I was just like, I don't, this is not for me, but I just wanted my mom off my back. So I said, I'll go there first. And, we went, and when I got there, I wasn't impressed. It's kind of like, whatever. And I went out to the track and I got to train with the track team a little bit and kind of see what they were doing, watch the practice and talk to the coach. And he was nice, but it was just like, nothing.
Where did you want to go?
I didn't even care, honestly. I didn't care at all. I was liking the University of Florida. I had seen that school. I was a big Gators fan for football, college football. So I was like, University of Florida would be good. Saw some stuff from USC and thought, that would be good. So I just wanted to go Division I. I just wanted to be big time. I wanted the girls and the parties and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that's what I was going to get if I went to Division I. But after I stayed the night on campus at APU with some of the guys on the track team and then went and met some people, some more people. And do you remember Rachel? I don't know if you remember Rachel from back in the day. She played soccer. I can't think of her last name right now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Rachel Llanos.
Yes, Rachel Llanos. So Rachel Llanos, when I got to APU, was the goalie for the soccer team, and I just happened to roll out to the track, and I didn't even know. I just rolled out to the track, and I saw her practicing, and so we connected. And as soon as we connected, I was like, changed my whole perspective on the school, right? Like now all of a sudden somebody else from Hawaii was there, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. So I talked to her for a while, and then after spending like 2 days on campus, meeting Rachel, kind of hanging out with her, kind of getting to meet some friends, something about the school there was just this sense of peace that kind of came over me. And before I left, I signed my letter of intent, and that's where I went to school, canceled all the other visits, and that's how I made that decision. And so again, so many times in my life, I think about the decisions and the things that were made. And it's like, it wasn't, I was dead set against going to that school. Right. But something stepped in and guided me and just, changed my heart just a little bit to make me do something that I would ordinarily not do. And I don't know why. I mean, I kind of know why now, but at the time I didn't know why. I didn't know who or what or how. But that's where I went to school. And man, I think about if I had gone somewhere else, I have no idea where I'd be right now. No idea. I know it wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be what it was, or what it is right now. And so I just so blessed, so thankful,
I think there's a great lesson in
every day as a blessing.
The great lesson in that blessing, I was thinking, Bryan, is that you went to a smaller school, a Christian school, NAIA, not a D1 school, where the logical D1 choices would have been all, Oregon, USC. Of course, you wanted Florida, Oklahoma, great track, Texas, incredible track programs. Yep. In some sense, you would have been one of many gifted athletes, and would have been hard to get your time, to get your opportunity. But then you go to Azusa Pacific and you become, all of a sudden, with hard work, perseverance, and prayer, and God changing a lot of things in your heart, you become this big man on campus. You become a huge fish in a smaller pond, which probably I would assume that made the opportunity and doors open. I mean, with your giftedness, your athleticism. Like, Bryan, how tall are you? Like 5'11"?
5'10".
5'10", and you competed in one of the most difficult sports in the world. You did the pole vault, a long jump, you did the discus throw, you did a decathlon, you sprinted. That's incredible for 5'10", and you beat all these long Europeans, not to mention just your own fellow Americans.
Yeah.
You wrote a book. They got to go get the book. Tell us about the book, because we're going to move on in the podcast, but they need to hear and read your story.
Well, yeah, my book is called Redemption. And it's really about my journey. It's about, being broken and not being perfect. And I go through not every aspect of my life, but I go through some of the bigger moments in my life and some of the moments that really stood out to me as I was growing up. And I walked them through that path all the way to, high school and from high school into college, and college into going for, the Olympic gold, and how different events in my life changed me and molded me. And there are events that you wouldn't think of. It wasn't like, oh, he won the Olympics and then that molded and changed him. And don't get me wrong, there's been a lot of growth since that moment as well. But they're little moments. They're moments like being failed in PE in the 6th grade, and failing a class that I got an A in, all the time, and lessons learned there. There are lessons like Richard Ainsworth, who was, one of my youth pastors before you, right?
He's the best.
Just was played such a pivotal role in my life. And not as a youth pastor, as a friend.
Right.
As a friend, somebody that could come rescue me when I needed to be rescued, and could rescue my parents when they needed to be rescued. It's just stuff like that. I think people, you don't look at those moments and go, oh, those are the moments that are going to make or break someone's future. But they are. They're these little moments, not these big grandiose moments, they're the little moments that just stack up and build to create, I think, the people that you see today. And so I walked through all of that, and explain some of that stuff in detail, talk about the lessons that I've learned. And then of course it all culminates with, winning the Olympic gold. And so it's I love the book because it's my story, and I think it's great. I think when I was writing the book and even up to a few years ago, I didn't understand, maybe all of the significance of it. But as I get older, as I mature more, as I begin to have my own experience with my kids, and I do a lot of reflection, on my life, I start to think to myself, wow, like, how did that happen? It just seems unbelievable to me.
It is.
And so that's kind of the story of, how that all took place.
For us, a lot of Hawaii was totally cheering you on. We come from the 50th state. We're like the half tribe of Manasseh, out of the 12 tribes, and every time you hear somebody like Gideon or somebody say, I'm the least in my family out of the whole tribe of, that's how Hawaii feels a lot of time.
That's how I felt,
Yeah, and you come from a small town. You're smaller framed, but you're an incredible athlete. Work ethic, God's blessing is on you, and we start watching you beat all of these very, very popular people. There was one time at one Olympics, it was the Dan and something show.
Dan and Dave.
Dan and Dave. It was Dan and Dave. It was Dan and Dave, and then all of a sudden, who's Dan and Dave? This is Bryan and Bryan Clay. Yeah. We're watching you on the grandest Olympic stage, and our hopes are all with you. Our highs are with you, our lows are with you. When you're disappointed with your javelin throw, we were disappointed with you. When you didn't run fast enough, we were with you. When you were winning, we were with you the whole time. I'm telling you right now. And I don't know what it was like from your perspective, but it must have been incredible. But for us to see one of ours, especially because I knew you, see a small town kid basically make it on the world's platform, world stage. To me, not only is that redemption, that's the pound for pound principle. Just shameless plug of my book right now, the pound for pound principle, Bryan. Doing the best you can with what God gave you. It's the parable of the talents. So
absolutely.
2004, from that Olympics, I know you competed again in 2008. And you could have gone even further, I believe. But let me ask you, what was your favorite event? Name all 10, if you don't mind. The 10 events, and what was your favorite?
Yeah, so 10 events, 100, long jump, shot put, high jump, 400. Second day, you do the 110 hurdles, discus, pole vault, javelin, and the 1500. Out of those, it's so hard. My mindset was always like, I didn't have favorites. It's like, you're 10 children and trying to pick a favorite of the 10. It's like, you really can't do that. And the reason why it's so hard for me is because if you allow yourself to think of one that's your favorite, you tend to focus on that one. Right. Yeah. And you kind of lean towards wanting to do that one all the time. And then everything else kind of takes a hit. And so I really never got into that, but there were definitely events that came easier for me than others. The discus was an event that I did very, very well at, but I worked really, really hard at. And so while I ended and still to this day have the world record in the decathlon discus, it was also an event that I spent a lot of time focusing on because I felt like it was an event that I needed to get good at. And so it went from being a frustrating event for me to being a really great event for me. And to this day, I still feel like I can step into the discus ring and I just know it so well.
I can see you throwing it right now. I can totally see you. Keep going.
Exactly. Like I think through and it's like I did it so much that it became reflex. So it's like I could hear the wind passing by my ear, and the sound would tell me where I was at in the ring. I mean, it became part of who I was, just what my body did. And so there were events like that. And then there were events that I enjoyed, like the long jump, which is a fun event, but also could be very, very frustrating. If you're just a little bit off, or if your rhythm's not right, or if whatever might be kind of messing it up. And so they all, I love all of them at specific times, and I hate all of them at specific times. But I can tell you which one I hate the most, and that's the 1500. The 1500 is the worst.
I hate that one the most.
And I think part of it is not so much that it's not my body wasn't built for the distance running. It was that, but also that it was the last event out of the 10, and over 2 days. Waking up at 5 a.m. and going to bed at like 2 a.m. And then, waking up at 5 a.m. the next morning on 3 hours of sleep and competing from, literally both days from 9 a.m. all the way until like 11 p.m. And by the time you're done, you're so exhausted. And so you get to that last event, and that last event is like, it's like the worst thing you could ever think of. You're completely drained. I say physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. You're drained. You've got nothing left. You're running on fumes. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I have to do the one event that I'm not good at. It's the longest event, and I've got to actually finish it. I can't just throw in a towel. I have to actually finish it and do well at it, or I'm not going to win. It's just like, all you want to do is just be like, listen, I'm done. I don't want to do this, but you got to find a way to kind of get through it. And you can't just go through the motions. You actually have to try. Otherwise you could lose.
You could. Bryan, the thing about track is, and I'm kind of glad none of my kids like track because a track event takes forever. I mean, you're there forever. With volleyball, we're in and we're out. We're out in like hour and a half. But with track, man, you paying the price. Parents are under the sun and they got their umbrellas, and wind or rain, it doesn't matter. But I can imagine for a decathlete, you have to wait so long between every single event that your muscles and then all of the sights, the sounds. I can only imagine what that was like to be in the Olympic Village for you and having to work out and eat at the same time and be able to get adequate sleep. I can only imagine what that must have been like to have all of those different athletes at the top of their game just strutting around that stadium. What was that like, man? Was that intimidating in any way?
For me, no. So early on in my career, I actually met with a sports psychologist. And it was like right in the beginning, right when I got to Azus Pacific, I had made like a junior development kind of decathlon development group. And so I got to go to the Olympic Training Center, and it was like the first time, like, seeing the Olympic Training Center, seeing Olympians like train, like really train, and that sort of thing. And one of the things that they had us do is they had us meet with a sports psychologist because they wanted us to understand where our strengths and our weaknesses were from a psychological standpoint. And I remember, as I met with the sports psychologist and I walked through all of these things, the sports psychologist basically told me, he said, Bryan, listen, like, you are probably one of the mentally toughest athletes that I know, that I've ever met. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really good. But again, I think looking back, it's not because I was just tough. I think it's because of the way I was raised. It's, like, people may not realize it, but like, I always tell people, like, Hawaiians are kind of some of the toughest people you're going to meet, right? Because it's just this, it's the way we carry ourselves. It's the way that we do things. We're a proud culture. We love, fiercely and passionately, but we will fight, with the same fierceness, and so I think,
big 5-0, baby.
Yeah, I think being raised like that, gives you this mental toughness. You don't let somebody come in and tell you what you can and can't do. Like, you're going to prove them wrong. You just have that mentality. And so I think that, along with my grandfather and the Japanese culture that I grew up in, teaching me about, perfection and excellence and pride and honor and work ethic, all of that, I think, created this mental side of me that when I went into competitions, when I saw people, I wasn't cocky. I was always respectful. I understood, but I studied them. I knew what their strengths and weaknesses were. I knew, I would make them human in my own mind, and I knew that I could beat them, because I knew I was going to work harder. And so when I would walk out there and I would see these guys, I always had, like, before a competition, I had this little, kind of, I guess you could say, ritual that I would do, where I would get to the track early and I would go through and I'd walk the track and go through all my events. But as the other athletes would kind of walk onto the track, I would kind of size them up in my head. I'd be like, okay, I'm going to beat him here. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And I would come out on top of that little scenario that I would play in my head. And so I'm like, okay, I got him. I would see the next one. I'd be like, okay, I got him. I'd see the next one. I'd be like, okay, I got him. And I would know how I was going to do it already. And it didn't always work out that way. Right. But I had this mindset. And so
you got some gold, bro. It sounds like it worked out well.
It worked out all right. But that was the habit that I got myself into. Right. And that was how I was able to walk into scenarios like the Olympic Games and not look at it as like, oh crap, like, what am I going to do now? But walk into it and going, listen, I belong here. Yeah, like, this isn't like, oh, I made it on accident. Like, I belong here, and I have every chance of winning this as long as I don't make mistakes, as long as I execute on everything I've done the last 4 years or the last 8 years. If I execute, like, I'm going to win this thing, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. And so it was amazing, and it was special. To be there at the Olympic Training Center. But quick story, I didn't actually stay at the Olympic Training Center. I stayed a few nights in the beginning, and then I actually spent, both Olympics, my own money to stay outside of the Olympic Training Center with my coaches. And so, we spent upwards of $30,000 each time to have an apartment that was away from the Olympic Training Center, where it was just me and my coaches. And we would catch a cab, to the track every morning. But that was just because I needed to be away from all the distractions and stuff. And even what I do when I was going through my ritual at the track, like that can be a distraction because it's mentally and emotionally draining. And so if you do that for long periods of time before your competition, you're going to enter that competition already mentally and kind of emotionally drained a little bit. And so I needed to start with my tanks on full. So we stayed away from it. I got that out of the way. And then when I got to the track, it was time to rock. So.
Yeah, the name came back to me all of a sudden, and it's been 14 years at least since or so. And I'm 16 years since 2004. And I think your biggest competition was a guy named Roman Serbely.
Yeah, Roman Serbely from the Czech Republic.
That was amazing. I mean,
yeah, he was a world record holder, by the way.
Right.
At the time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Guys, if you don't know, man, you need to go back and Google and YouTube the 2004 Olympics, because you probably have not seen this for a lot of you, your younger generation, but track and field, right. I'm telling you, we are being deprived in the world right now because there is no Olympics, because that's the fire that keeps on bringing this back. And I'm just thinking about you, Bryan. So behind you is your box of Wheaties, and it dawned on me, I had a box of Wheaties that you signed, and I don't know where that box is. I don't know if somebody took my Wheaties, ate my Wheaties, but that is one of the pinnacles of success in the sports arena in America, is if you make it on a Wheaties box. And that's another level of gold medal. Tell me, Bryan, a little bit about that. What was it like standing on the highest platform? 2008, you won silver. That was incredible too. But in 2004, winning gold, what was that like for you? That moment where you hear the Star-Spangled Banner, you see your flag raised, you're looking up with your gold medal around your neck. What was going through your head?
It's you can't even put it into words. It's the question that I think I get asked by everyone, but it's the question that I have the hardest time, explaining, because for Beijing, I was standing in the middle of the stadium. It's full of 100,000 people. There's, 1 billion people or more watching, on TV, and you know that, and you feel that, right? Like as you're standing there, you feel the eyeballs and the world, watching.
Right.
And then to know, that you actually accomplished something that you could only dream of, like your wildest dreams, like things that people are like, that'll never come true, but if I could do this is what I would do. Like one of my wildest dreams, I actually accomplished. And I remember as I was crossing the finish line of the 1500 meters in Beijing, I remember laying on the floor, and I think I shared this with you before, but I remember laying on the floor, staring up at the sky in the middle of the stadium. The crowd is cheering. I know my wife's waiting, and everything kind of like phases out, right? Blacks out. And I'm inside my own head. And as I'm looking at things, and I know where I am, I see the slideshow of my life kind of going through, different times in my life. And I remember, each one of those, slides, it would kind of pause on different ones. And I remember those very vividly. The emotion would come back, the pain, the elation, different things would flood me. Wow. And you almost are moved to tears when you're experiencing it. But it's not sad, right? It's this feeling of satisfaction. And as each slide would pause on different moments of my life, I would remember thinking like, oh yeah, that was worth it. It was worth it. That was worth it. And I got to the end of this slideshow, realizing that I had accomplished one of my wildest dreams, that every moment up into my life leading up into that point was absolutely worth all of what I experienced, to be able to experience this one moment. And that I was able to work so hard for something, and actually accomplish that. all I can say is that, besides the relief, because that's really the first thing you feel is like, oh my gosh, I actually did it. Like, oh, thank you. And you just feel this weight drop off of you. But more than anything, it was just this level of satisfaction that is indescribable. I don't know how to describe it to anyone else other than when I was running on the track in high school, and it was after a coach, he had said, just leave everything at the gates. I always tell people, my mom, when I was in high school, made me watch the movie Chariots of Fire. And Eric Liddell in that movie has a famous line, and he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure.
Right.
And when I would run at the track in high school, I would run, and I just felt like, like my dad was proud of me, and sorry, I'm going to start.
It's okay. That's good. It's good.
I just felt like, like my dad was proud of me. And when I went to the Olympics and I won that gold medal, I just felt like for the first time in my life, people were proud of me.
Wow.
I've never cried. Story.
Well, bro, because we're definitely proud of you, man. I tell you what, Hawaii was so proud of you. I know there are so many people proud of you on the journey. Martin He, Richard Ainsworth, people at Azusa Pacific, a whole state was so proud that, again, another local boy put us back on the map. And it was one of the most incredible moments for us to watch. And
thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that vulnerable moment. I really I appreciate that, and I treasure that, Bryan, because to see where you were, everybody, if you know his story, you got to read Redemption. You got to get that book. All the turmoil that he went through as a young child, a young man trying to find his way, and to being on the Olympic stage and being given an incredible medal with a beautiful wife and a family in Hawaii cheering him on. It just must have been surreal. And Bryan, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time.
No problem.
Bryan, so now, what would you say then? Right now, some 13-year-old young man, young girl is watching this, or some 25-year-old guy who's stuck right now and he's frustrated. What would you say to that person right now?
I would say, I know it's hard, especially in Hawaii, right? Like, you don't know, and when you're young, you don't know what your contribution to the world can be. And I think sometimes because of where we live, like how we live, like especially even right now, you look at the current state of the world, right? The current state of our country. It gets really hard to believe that dreams come true. It gets really hard to believe that you deserve so much more. It's really, really hard, I think, sometimes for us to believe that as a Christian, God wants more than we could ever imagine. Like, how do you wrap your head around the fact that somebody wants more for you than even you could possibly ever imagine? And that feeling that I was just trying to describe of feeling like somebody's just proud of you and being satisfied with your life. It's all there. Like, it's there for you as well. And so as a young kid, as a young man or woman, I would say, like, God wants more for you than you could ever imagine. I promise you. I know it to be true because I've lived it. I know it. I would just say, like, just dive into him, find out what that is. Like, it's okay if you make mistakes along the way.
Right.
God knows I was not perfect, but never lose hope and never lose faith. He will never let you down, and he wants more than you could ever imagine. So just own that, just embrace it and go become the person God wants you to be. Don't worry about all the little stuff that's trying to derail you. And I know there's some big stuff that's trying to derail you, but just focus on the fact that your Father in heaven wants more from you than you could ever imagine, than your parents could ever want. That the person that loves you the most, God wants more for you than that person does, because they're not capable of seeing how big his plan is for your life. And if you can just harness that and support and embrace that, I promise you, you're going to be the next one sitting on this podcast, sharing, the satisfaction of knowing that you did a good job, that your Father in heaven is looking at you even before you get to the pearly gates, but he's looking at you right now and he's saying, good job. I'm proud of you. I love you. And there's nothing better than that. There's not a drug in the world that's going to make you feel like that. There's not a boy or a girl in the world that is going to make you feel like that. I promise you, there's not enough money. There's not a business, position that you can get that's going to make you feel that way. So don't compromise, don't sacrifice things to get the worldly satisfaction. Keep your eyes focused on the Lord. Keep your eyes focused on what he wants you to be, and just go after it relentlessly.
Bryan, that's amazing. You just did 1 Corinthians 2:9, and while you were doing it, I was imagining Hebrews, and therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses to the life of faith, and I'm just watching this arena of you in the middle of it, and just God blowing your mind. Ephesians 3:20, 1 Corinthians 2:9, all over this. And Bryan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time for the Homegrown Heroes podcast. You are our second guy to be on it. You were number one on my list when I called you back in early June. And just hearing you relive the stories has just been incredible. So Bryan, just tell us, what are you doing now? What's new for Bryan Clay and the family and Sarah and the kids in Seattle, Washington?
Yeah, so we moved to Seattle, a couple years ago from Southern California. We lived out, in the town Glendora, which is right next to Azusa Pacific University, for almost 20 years. Kind of had the kids there, got married, bought our first, house there, and all that kind of stuff. And then we moved to Seattle because my wife Sarah is from the Seattle area, and her family was up here, and so it was, little cheaper, a little easier to make that move than to move back home to Hawaii. And I had my businesses up here. And so anyways, we moved to Seattle, and that's what we're doing. We're just trying to spend as much time with family as possible. Trying to raise my kids to understand who the Lord is, to have a healthy fear of the Lord, but also know, that anything's possible with God on your side, and just helping them discover who God wants them to be, which has been a lot of fun. Again, I think it just reminds me of how blessed I was, and it reminds me of just, what an amazing job my mom did as a single mom, raising me and my brother, and getting us to where we are today. So I enjoy having that reminder every day in my life, trying to be the best husband I can be, work. Like I said, I started 2 companies, and work is crazy,
Tell us about them. Tell us about those companies.
So I've got a fitness company. One's a fitness franchise. It's called Eat the Frog Fitness. So that's why I'm wearing my Eat the Frog Fitness shirt. So we sell franchises all over the country. Actually, globally now, we've got a couple international in Canada. It's not real international, but it's international. But we've got 2 in Canada. And as we sell those franchises across the country, people are popping them up and opening. And so we've got over 350 licenses that are kind of awarded and sold out there. So you'll see them popping up as time goes on. We've got over 21 locations open right now. We've only been in franchise sales for about just about 3 years right now. So it's been pretty amazing. We've got a small tech company in California that I'm a part of, helped co-found, and we build fitness apps. And so they're really working hard there and developing different apps and things like that, which has been a lot of fun. My wife Sarah works from home, so she's got her at-home business, which has been amazing. But yeah, trying to manage all that and still keep, my priorities in order. My faith comes first. I always say my family comes second, and everything else comes third. But still trying to live that out and prove to people that you can be unbelievably successful while maintaining those values and priorities. You don't have to compromise on any of that stuff. And that's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. Bryan, it has been a pleasure and an honor just to listening to you and getting caught up and knowing your story. We have so many common friends, especially after you went to Azusa Pacific. I don't know if you know Jedediah Thurner. You remember Jedediah, who's on the football team?
Yeah, I know Jed. Yeah.
Jedediah is he's my younger brother, and he's one of my closest friends. We just reconnected. We just got connected about, just a few years ago, him and his best friend, Micah Carvalho. And anyway, bro, I'm so proud of you. It's such an honor to see what you're doing, all of the great things that are happening in your life, in business. I can imagine coming off one world stage and that arena and God replacing it with something of meaning and significance. And you already had that in your relationship with him and with your kids and with your family. And now to see that happening in the business arena. Well done, bro. Way to go.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Everybody, we've been having a great time with Bryan Clay. Make sure you get his book, Redemption. He literally plays out in his life the parable of the talents and the pound for pound principle. Bryan Clay, everybody, decathlete, gold and silver medalist, and a whole lot more. Make sure you get his book, Redemption. And Bryan, I just want to add one thing. Bryan, do the audiobook with your voice when you get a moment.
Oh, okay.
Because that audiobook is incredible, but to have you speaking it and actually pronouncing the Hawaiian words correctly would be amazing.
Oh, yeah. All right, will do. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for your time, everybody. Thank you for being with us on the Homegrown Heroes podcast with Bryan Clay. I'm Mike Kai from Inspire Church and your host. Until we meet again, God bless you and aloha. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me on this week's Homegrown Heroes episode. Don't forget to hit subscribe and let me know in the comments what you enjoyed the most. You can also find me on Instagram at Mike Kai and let me know who you would love for me to interview. I look forward to seeing you soon on the next episode of Homegrown Heroes.